So welcome. So I'm Mahalia Baldini and I am acting as the interim state director. Some of you may or may not know that our fearless leader, Anson Green, his last day with the state as the AEL director was actually July 3rd. And he has went on to the corporate world to be a corporate person and working with Tyson Foods. So I'm stepping in for him and I'm really happy to be here and have this presentation, this opportunity with you today. As Krista said, I have a couple of co-presenters, and we have Christina Robinson, and she is the Executive Director for Adult Education and Literacy out in Houston Community College. And Christina's got her work cut out for her because from what I hear, they're getting ready to go into a serious lockdown in Houston due to the pandemic. So this is, I think, very timely in terms of how do we keep the wheels moving during this time. And then we also have Linda Ross, who is the AEL Coordinator of Curriculum and Instruction. They're at Temple College, close here to Austin, who's going to be working and talking with us today and sharing some of the things that are coming out of Temple College as a result of this intake and orientating students at a distance. So let's go ahead and get started. So for today, just a quick overview of some of the things we're hoping to accomplish in this hour. I want to give you a status update of where we are right now for Texas AEL, kind of forecast some things for you of what's coming and what has happened in the pandemic. And then we're going to learn primarily today and focus our efforts really on intake and orientation. And more specifically, how do you really do this comprehensive assessment of students at a distance when you can't really get that face-to-face time and you're not doing that direct time with the students sitting in a chair in sort of a brick and mortar environment. And then we're going to start to really talk about and build on all the innovative strategies that are happening and all the success that we're having in Texas right now. So part of how we're doing here in Texas is discussing really what the world looks like in comparison to where we would be at this point of time in a general program year when we weren't having a pandemic. So this is the number of active students, and what you're particularly looking at right now is the number of active students in comparison for the program year 2018 versus program year 2019, which we just finished. So if you're looking back to April of 2018, we had 26,000 students roundabout that were actually participating in services. Now, this isn't the total of number of students that we served for that entire program year. What we're really talking about here is how many students were actually coming to class and generating instructional hours during the month of April in 2018. And if you move over to May of 2018, you can see that there's always a pretty significant drop once we hit April. And this is very general for just historically how our enrollment tends to go. So you can see that we have about 5,000 people that dropped off from April to May in terms of, again, coming to class, actually getting instructional time in the year of 2018. If you look at this in terms of 2019, which is the program year that we are currently closing out right now, in April we had about 19,000 students that were getting contact hours, and then in May we had still 15,000 students in the state of Texas that in the midst of this pandemic were still receiving instructional hours. Next slide. In particular, one thing that I wanted to bring up, and it kind of, I think helps to frame up what we're talking about today, is continuing to serve students even within the pandemic and within all the restrictions that we have in many ways is very possible. We had 1,100 students in the month of May come into our system and request and enroll in services. So of that 15,000 that you're seeing, 1,100 of them are kind of new students coming into class and sitting in class and being in class with us. And part of that and our discussion today is really, how do you recruit during this time? How do you complete the intake and registration and orientation process for these new students that ultimately will be coming through our system? So what's the future going to hold during the pandemic? One thing I can tell you for sure in terms of what to expect for enrollment and how is this really going to impact you locally in terms of intake and orientation, if you really think about what the unemployment rate looks like in Texas right now. And what you're really seeing here on this unemployment dashboard. And one thing I want to point out to this before I talk about the actual data is where you can find this data, because it's very useful information. So I've included the actual web page that you can go, and it's a dashboard from the state of Texas. So if you're interested in kind of knowing who are the UI claimants, just in terms of general demographics, and also what industries are most impacted and affected right now in the state due to the pandemic, it's a great little resource for us as well. And the reason why it's a great resource for us is because if you take a look at this dashboard, which is really data from May 27th through June 27th, what you're going to see if you're looking at that left-hand column there is all the industries that are largely impacted and are filing UI claims right now. So these are folks that have been laid off and furloughed due to pandemic, and it's not going to be surprising what you're going to see there. But what you will probably notice, as I have, is that many of these industries are largely employ our population, low basic skills, individuals who are lacking high school diplomas, or those that have low literacy skills. So restaurant workers, childcare workers, home health folks, all of these are industries that have a lot of our student population in them. So our students are very affected, obviously, by the pandemic.
There's a question, are these numbers for 2020 this year or last year?
These are current. So this is for May 27th, 2020 through June 27th, 2020. So very timely for these numbers. Good question. So what we know really with that information and kind of being able to see sort of those top 25 industries that are most highly impacted with UI claims, layoffs, and things like that, is that typically historically has meant a surge in growth for adult education. When individuals are, laid off, then they tend to say, well, now's a good time to get my HSC. Now's a good time to go back and work on my personal growth and my English skills. So typically what we see is that individuals will start enrolling in our services, and you will start to see individuals that are seeking out our services. So the little chart that you're looking at here is 3.3 million claims. This is a national chart. So 3.3 million claims as of March 21st, 2020. And all of those are really potential students for us. And so as a nation and as, a country, I would expect that we would see a large amount of growth in adult education across the nation, and especially here in Texas. So in terms of how do we then begin to message our services, and how do we really let people know that Texas is open for business? And a person on my staff the other day, we had someone, we get calls and emails all the time, and they said, hey, I'm looking to get my go back and get my GED while I'm laid off. Are you guys open? And Maria's response was all caps, yes, we are open. And that is a great message. And it's definitely something at the local level that, how you really message that and how you create that market for individuals that are looking for services is very important. And so enrolling new students is always going to be the goal, because we want to serve Texans and we want to obviously help assist with basic skills and getting people their GEDs or their high school equivalencies. But they need to know how they can do that during the pandemic and how can they do that safely. So let's talk a little bit about students who are going to be coming into the system, and we're going to have to still follow all of the requirements that we've always had, even though we are creating some flexibilities at the state level for you guys to do that safely so that you can continue to enroll, on a regular managed cycle. What are we really doing at the state level? And then the peers that we have online with us today are going to talk about some of the strategies and things that they have done at the local level to ensure that they can be open for business. So serving new students at a distance, one thing I always say, and I frame this up kind of in some guiding principles. And so when you're developing these processes locally for how you're going to continue to stay in business and enroll students, some guiding principles for me are keep people safe. So you have to make sure that staff and students understand, and you want to market that sort of as a clear message that that's our number one priority, is to keep people safe. The second one is keep it simple. How do you really build a process to ensure that you are getting all the requirements that we have here at the state, even with the flexibilities that we have implemented because of the pandemic and due to the pandemic, but you're still getting what you need to best serve that student and best serve that student's needs, but you want to keep it simple. The third one is decide what you need to know to effectively serve those students. And sometimes that is very different where we are in the pandemic right now, because we have to ask so many additional questions in order to really serve the student based off of where they are. That could be barriers, that could be digital literacy, that could be a technological divide, internet. Do you have internet? Do you have a computer? All of these things may not have been things that we asked prior to this, but they're definitely things that we're asking now because of the pandemic and because of our need and the necessity to do this in a virtual way. So what do those methods really look like now, as of today, and how many of you have been operating over the last several months to sort of transition from that brick and mortar establishment into a more robust online option for students, access to technology and broadband services, and how has the delivery of that changed from, to computer-based or tablet-based, phone-based instructional practices, and then the streams of communication, which likely, before may have been a phone call, now we're trying to text, we're chat, we're using apps to be able to reach out and re-engage students. So if you're really trying to look for and see the flexibilities that TWC has created during this time, and when you're thinking about these innovative strategies that you are wanting to develop locally, we have put out some guidance for this, and it's kind of loosened things up a little bit just to allow you at the local level to find implementation processes that are really going to work for you, given your staff, the staff that you have, giving, whatever your rural or urban and all of these other things that you have to take into consideration. So this link provided here is going to lead you to the documents that we have developed here at TWC. That's going to be the framework for how then local processes and procedures are developed. And you can see there at the very top, and this is just an image. If you go to the link, you'll be able to see it. But there at the top is a good kind of overview of the things that you can be expecting within some of these documents. We focus heavily on personally identifiable information. How do we keep that safe now that we're working sort of in this remote world where we're sending information kind of to and fro through the internet? How do we keep student information safe? Developing a plan with your administration. Many of you have already done that, but you will probably in the weeks and months ahead be going back and now that you know what you know, you'll constantly be updating what that plan looks like with your administration folks as we continue to move into the new school year. Intake at a distance, which is what we'll be focusing on today. You can also find information in there about what about students that are going to be returning to services to us. Maybe they've been out for a while. That's a little bit different design, as we all know, from someone that's just fresh coming into our system and have never been our system before. But we can't sort of escape the reality that even for returning participants and even for returning students, the world that we know is very different. And we want to make sure and have to make sure that we are being very inclusive of the fact of all the changes that have been made, even for our returning students. There's also some information in there about documentation and data entry expectations. Some of those things have changed as well, just due to the flux of all of this. So it's just a really good piece of guidance. And we will continue to put out guidance, and we'll continue to put out like frequently asked questions as we're getting those in, just to make sure that everybody's got the latest and greatest in terms of where we are here at the state level on everything related to the pandemic and services for students. So recruit, enrolling, assessing, and placing students. This is what I really wanted to bring Christina and Linda on board for today, so they can kind of talk about what they're doing locally. Here at the state office, we look at the federal law and we kind of say, this is what we want to do here in Texas, but it's really up to you guys to develop these strategies and develop things that are going to work locally. So we want to make sure that we give the platform to our folks that are actually doing the work locally. Next slide. So 5 steps for new students, and we went over this before, but again, this is kind of how we see things at the state level. in terms of if you're making a plan with your administration on intake and assessment, this is kind of what we're looking at. You want to make sure you have a good plan. You want to make sure you have a recruitment strategy in place, intaking the students at a distance. Short-term staff determined eligibility. We've relaxed a couple of things in terms of that really hard, like everybody's got to get a pre-test before they can get placed in class. We understand the constraints involved in getting someone an actual NRS approved test. And we've got some things that are happening here at the state level to kind of open that up to make sure that the main focus is on getting people enrolled in our services and serving people that are in need, not all this, real performance laden requirements that we find ourselves in all the time. So I want to get to and give time to Christina and Linda for what they're going to be presenting today. And that's really about building these strategies for success, and hear from them about what they are doing there locally in Houston and then out here in Temple College. So Christina, if you'll go ahead and gear up your PowerPoint. I'm going to switch things over to you. Oh, are you in San Francisco? That would be amazing.
I am. I get remote from anywhere. So, how cool is that? Well, good afternoon, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. So one of the things we were asked to do was talk about our intake and orientation at a distance. And for HCC, obviously, just like you all, we had this state where, everything was paper and we had to move super fast. And we really couldn't see what was happening. And so we moved into a breakdown, and these are really the areas that I wanted to talk about today is your people, your process, and your technology. So as you move into this new digital world, how are you breaking that down in order to make sure that intake process is going to work? And we know in order to make it happen, we have to have multiple touch points. We have to have tracked entry and links, checkpoints throughout the process. And then we really have to identify the digital skill level of the people that are working. And then process, we've really had to break the process down to make sure that there's clear, actionable steps, because students don't necessarily understand the steps that we think they do. For example, we might say, well, upload a JPEG. Well, they don't know necessarily what a JPEG is. Our follow-up has to be super structured, and then that even comes down to our testing process. How does that integrate in order to have that structured workflow? And then lastly, technology. Obviously, we have Canvas, we have WebEx, but what we found is the video-based is more effective for our students right now. And so we find that they're watching the videos. YouTube, for example, we're using YouTube heavily right now for videos, even down to instruction prep. So if you're breaking your process down to people, process, and technology, it will help you significantly. So our intake process, as we redefined it in the past, we've always had students have the ability over the last year to go online and sign up for orientation. But now when they go to sign up for orientation, they actually get a link. And what this link looks like, you can see here, Joe is signing up, he's putting in his information, he's selecting his time, and then he automatically gets a link emailed to him. When he gets that link, this is what it's going to look like. His orientation session, the time, the date, and then he registers for that orientation. But at the same time, he's going to get an email. And in this email, it has a whole breakdown of all the steps that he has to do to go through the process. So in order to even attend orientation, he has to download WebEx. Well, the first question students have, how do I download WebEx? Then he needs to watch a video. We have broken our orientation down now into several different steps, because what we were finding is one long orientation just wasn't working in a digital format. So first, they have an introduction video, and this is going to talk to them, what is AEL about? What's it going to look like? How do we expect them to attend? And this video is about 15 minutes. Then they're going to go through and they're going to complete an online application. Once they do that, we then flow them into our OneFlow system. And I know some of you all have seen me talk about our OneFlow system, but it is our CRM process. And you can see they have to create an account first in our PeopleSoft system, which is our HCC system. And then as soon as they create that account, we've linked the two together so they get a Claim Your Account email. When they get the Claim Your Account email, they then complete these supplemental forms online, which is your ADA discrimination, your RISIC inventory, your self-attestation, all the required documents that you have, in addition to another 25-minute video. Once they go through that, they attend virtual orientation. So virtual orientation was that orientation I showed you at the front end, that link that they received. This virtual orientation is about an hour long, and it literally walks them through any gaps that they had going through the process on their own. Because as we know, students are still going to have challenges. Once they go through that virtual orientation process, which is required, they have the ability to register for class and pay their registration fee. And you can kind of see the breakout steps here. Then they begin the process of utilizing this portal. And what I wanted to show, which was really important, is you can see where your students stopped in the process. So let's say they didn't watch the whole orientation video. Well, then they can't move forward in the process, or maybe they didn't complete their orientation form. So we really have been able to change our process to see things very vividly on what's happening and not happening in the intake process. In addition to that, you can see here, what the steps were. And once a student completes it and they have been approved, we lock that form for the student, and every staff member has to go through and do a staff attestation that information is correct. And then our compliance team goes and double checks the information to make sure it's correct as well. And we have roughly 5,000 plus students. And so it's really important for us to have a tracking mechanism for all of these forms in a digital way so that we can see everything that's happening all the time. In addition to that, we need to track that assessment process. So when the student comes into that workflow and they actually come into a queue, that student immediately is tagged for a testing schedule. So if they're an HSE student, they pick 3 different times for a TABE test. If they're a Best Plus student, then we just start scheduling those Best Plus tests, once again, all virtually. And then their assessment is uploaded here, once again, so everyone can see. For the intake process, if you look here, you'll see we've assigned 3 case managers here. And that's different managers at different parts of the intake process. So one might be assigned to testing, one might be assigned to document verification, and another one's assigned to making sure they have all the things that they need in order to get into the classroom. The way we do the final assignment is based on whoever that instructor is. So we actually have case managers assigned to instructors for that intake process, because our faculty can also help us with the intake process.
You have a couple of questions.
Sure.
One is at HCC, are AEL students real quotation marks, and then kind of the same along the same lines as how many AEL students? Yeah.
So yes, they're real students like any other student. HCC treats adult ed students like any other student, whether they're credit, non-credit. So they go through the entire process like any other student would go through. The only difference is that AEL students go through this OneFlow system, whereas regular students do not. And the reason we did this is because AEL students have very specific forms that they have to fill out. We needed adaptability, flexibility to change a form because we are actually funded under a consortium. So our consortium might say, hey, we want to add this form or that form. And so we need that flexibility. And our IT team for our system doesn't have that flexibility necessarily. It could take 2 years for me to get that process through my IT department. God love them. But with that being said, we have sole control over the system from adult ed. And I actually have one of my directors, he oversees the entire system. We submit tickets. Our instructors, staff, students can submit tickets for things that aren't working or they'd like to see better. And we own the system. So we help develop the system. So we have that flexibility and adaptability.
OneFlow is the name of the tracking program.
Right. Empira is the name of the system, but OneFlow is the version that we're using. And just so you know, even though we only log 5,000 students to get their numbers, I mean, we probably put 8,000 students in the system. They just don't necessarily all start, right? So as I mentioned, academic assessments here. And then if a student is missing a document or something, because we can all see across the board, and this is like a missed assignment, we've built out templates so both our faculty and staff can send templates. So maybe they're missing a payment, or they're missing their RISIC, or they're missing their ITEC, whatever it is, they have the ability to send that communication and assign that document to the student. So once again, it's a tracking process. And then lastly, we are now marking our students pending versus enrolled. And this is really, really important. In the past, when a student came in, they were quote unquote enrolled. Well, now with our new system, a student will stay pending. You can see right here, pending, until a staff member actually goes in, completes the verification, makes sure all those compliance documents are there, and then they can mark them enrolled. And so this, we believe, will help mitigate any compliance issues that we have. They have to have their tests done, their forms done. All of that has to be complete to be marked enrolled. And so that's where this is right here, enrolled status. But everybody can see, you know, the instructor. As a matter of fact, I got a call this morning about a student who reached out to CE, continuing education, and they said, is this your student? I was able to quickly go into the system and say, yes, this is the student, this is the instructor, and this is when she goes to class. So we have that flexibility now in this digital environment to make sure that our intake is really tight as possible. Now, obviously, we're still working through the process of fine-tuning things, but for the most part, this is helping us significantly. And to give you an example, over the weekend, we had 74 students hit the system, complete their paperwork because they wanted to start class Monday, which is yesterday. Obviously, they haven't completed the whole process, but because everything is in the system and online, we could actually get those students started next week if we wanted to. So once again, it gives us more flexibility and more adaptability. And that is basically our intake process. Any questions?
Tiffany Johnson wants to know who made your orientation videos.
Sure. So we designed them, and then we worked with our marketing department to record. So the English version is recorded by our marketing department. The Spanish version is recorded by a staff member, and the Vietnamese version is recorded by a staff member as well. So we did them all the same videos, but they all have the different languages because we felt that was highly needed. And we look at adding more languages as we go. And also, I forgot to mention in our intake process, because I didn't show the actual system, but in our intake process, every question is offered in 3 languages. So at the beginning, the student has the ability to pick their language. Yes, so the student has the ability to pick their language up front. So although we do conduct our classes in English, we're finding that that is helpful because they can watch that video in the language of their choice. And then we've also broken down orientation. So we have Spanish only orientation, English only orientation. So if you looked at the screen that I showed earlier that showed the web link, they're able to select if they want the English version, the Spanish version. We haven't offered the Vietnamese version yet, but I'm sure it will come.
Okay, excellent. And then Chris Gonzalez just had a comment at our ESC. We are working with our own technology department to create this sort of system through our own PD system. We will share how it goes.
You know, this is really all about sharing resources and information and just, you know, discussion about, you know, what innovative kind of things are happening out there to help us all out right now. So share it in the chat pod. And if you have any other questions for Christina, you can put them in there and she can answer those while we move on to our next presenter, Linda Ross from Temple. And Linda, if you want to queue up your resources there on your end.
Good afternoon. I hope everybody's doing well. I'm going to primarily cover our intake and orientation process. Wow, have things changed? A little bit about Temple College is that we have about 20 part-time instructors. We do ABE, HSE, ESL, and IETs, of course. We have 2 part-time instructional leads. We just have a new associate director who joined us. So we're still a very small team. We have 1,400 to 1,600 students that we serve in a year. We support the Bell and Milam counties. Our sub-grantee is Central Texas College. I think Lorraine is out there. And we also work with Workforce Solutions of Central Texas. Our intake process before COVID-19, it was very personal. People would come into our AEL building and they would meet with an enrollment specialist, Miss Nelva, and she would walk them through the complete enrollment packet. They could ask her questions, but they would sit there and complete the packet, provide their ID, SSN all at once. After that's done, the student will either take an assessment test then or have one scheduled. Once the assessment test is completed, then they go to an in-person orientation prior to class start. Where we are now, we're not near as sophisticated with the online enrollment as HCC, but we hope to be soon. You guys have done a tremendous job, Christina, in getting that up and running. For us in our small community college, we are mailing packets to students, or they pick up a packet on the outside of the building, and then they can drop it off or they can return mail it. We always include an envelope that's got paid postage so they can do so easily. When the students come in for assessment testing, we are practicing social distancing, so we have about 8 students at a time. And of course, the mask is required. Our orientation is also recorded and played. There are scheduled orientation times, and our staff actually recorded the orientation, so it's pretty cool, and it's on YouTube. The staff is in the orientation, of course. They're using Zoom, and they're able to stop and start the recording and answer student questions. Our biggest challenge has been, of course, the digital divide and helping those most in need. One of the things that we felt it was important to do is to create a technology survey that tells us more about the population that's being enrolled for the fall. We look at all of the questions and responses, assess their needs, and we try to provide solutions, both hardware and internet, as well as additional resources within the community. The first week of class, students participate in a technology tiered boot camp. If it's a student that doesn't have any hardware or doesn't have internet or basic skills, what we'll do is loan them either an iPad or a laptop and then walk them through some of the very basic computer skills that they need to know so that they can log on for that first orientation, so that they know how they can go to that first day of class. I've got a lot of slides on the student technology survey, so I'm just going to go through those very quickly. But of course, we want their name so that we can contact them if we have solutions for them. We want to know if they've got a computer at home. We want to know what type of devices they use. Do they share the devices with other members of the household? If they do, how many people are they sharing with, especially now? And should we go back to lockdown? You know, a family with children going to school, they may have 5, 6 people that need to use the computer for work, for school, and for job searches even. We ask them what type of devices they use, so we have an idea of what their limitations might be. Smart device like an iPhone versus a desktop computer or a laptop. And then we really are trying to validate some of their answers. And so we say, how often do you use your computer? We ask the question about, do you have internet access at home? What type of access do you have? If a student comes to us and says they don't have any internet access, we're working with local community partners on a different grant that will allow us to provide a stipend to pay for internet access. And the student is expected to complete a contract, expected to do so many hours per week of school, And if they don't, we just shut off the access. We want to know also what is some of the challenges that our students are facing. It can be everything from not having a computer to having to care for an adult family member or children. It could be that class times conflict with work schedules. So once again, we're just trying to get a better understanding of each individual and their particular needs, because not one solution fits all. The other question is, not that we can offer all these class times, but we want to know from our students, what are the best times that you can participate in class? I've heard from a lot of people that, during the day, it's just too hectic. There's too many priorities going on, and it would be so much better if they could participate in a remote or face-to-face class after 7 p.m. or after 8 or even after 9. Those are some of the most popular times that students request. Once again, we want to know how comfortable, how familiar students are, whether they have an email account. If they do, what do they use your email account for? How do they access their email? And all that, once again, validates their skill level. We then ask them specific questions about, do you know how to set a browser or a bookmark? Can you name and save a document? And after you have, can you find that same document? Upload and download files, send an email with an attachment. Because a lot of this, what we want to do is ensure students have some level of comfort so that when they start these classes, they'll feel confident. We also ask them about some specifics like online learning. How do you feel about that? You don't know how, you've never taken any online classes, or, I'm very confident. Google Classroom, Schoology, Canvas, Aztec, and so forth. And then we want to know, what do you need to be successful in your GED, HSE classes? Because there's so much more we can learn. And just any other comments or suggestions that they have. Some of the best changes come straight from the population we serve.
Linda, there's a couple of comments here. One, is it possible for us to get a link to this survey? And also, is the survey only in English?
Well, right now it's only in English. I was tweaking the survey this morning. I had run across, now let me just put this out there. When I created this survey, I used bits and pieces of surveys that I researched online and tried to create something or modify to something that our population and our needs are being addressed. Happy to provide the link. This survey was created on SurveyMonkey. It can also be very easily created with Google Form or even a Microsoft Word document. So yes, I'd be happy to send that out. Okay, any other questions?
Nope, that's it for now.
Okay, great, thank you. As I mentioned earlier, after orientation, students are going to go into a 1-week boot camp and really focus more on some of the finer pieces from a technology perspective that they need to know to be successful and to complete assignments. If they're an HSE GED student, then we want to talk to them about our supplemental tools like Aztec. If they're an ESL student, we want to go ahead and ensure they understand how to navigate Burlington English. The cool thing is that we, by doing all this, hopefully are addressing family literacy, because if we're giving them a Chromebook, an iPad, or a laptop, and we're giving them the training, they can then help their family members, their children, or their adult partners. Our next steps are to analyze all the responses, to correct any problems, and we want to always look for how we can do things in a more efficient and effective manner. Make sure that our staff feel very comfortable with high engagement activities for these remote learning processes. In a lot of ways, remote learning is so much better than the physical face-to-face class, because if you're truly doing it with an engagement policy in place, the only difference should be is that you're not contained in 4 physical walls, but you can see each other at the same time. The instructor can see the students can see the instructor, and there's live feedback and live engagement and live instruction going on. There's just so many advantages to remote learning, not to mention it's preparing them for employment opportunities as well. And then we are working toward getting to an online enrollment process. I hope by spring that will be good to go. The other piece of it is we need to ensure community is built within the classes and that we establish a buddy system. So it's an extended family. Students and instructors all care for one another and help nurture and motivate folks to do their best. Of course, I'm sure there's going to be many, many more steps for us to do. Any other questions?
Yes, the survey was only in English.
Right now, but I'll be translating it. Our orientation currently is in Spanish and English, and we're working on translations for Korean, Vietnamese. And as far as the survey, we're working on Spanish right now.
There was another
Okay.
question on there, and you may have answered it. It was about how long does it typically take the student to fill out the survey?
It depends on how wordy they want to get in the other or comment sections, but otherwise it's a matter of reading the question and select. Go to the next one, select. I mean, some people can do it within, I would say, 10 minutes easily, maybe even less.
Okay. And how does your buddy system work?
Well, it can work several ways. In a classroom environment, perhaps the instructors pair up individuals and put, like if they're using Zoom, they put them, and it may be more than 2 people. It may be a small group. If they're using Zoom, they could create a Zoom subroom, and then it's a lot easier for just a smaller segment of the class to talk. They start forming relationships where they care about one another. If somebody's missing or not coming to class, they'll call them and say, hey, are you okay? All of these things are working together to create that community that motivates the students, that lets the students know there's somebody out there that cares about them. We contact our students frequently via phone. Often we use Remind to ensure communications are timely and going straight to their phone, because truly people, it's fast reaction time with a text communication to the phone than it is to send out an email. You get better responses. You can send questions and get responses back so quickly. So it's really making the connection between all of our teachers and students.
Okay. There's another one. Is the survey embedded with your college? We can't use third-party hosts for surveys, etc.
No, unfortunately, not right now. That is the one thing that we need to work on. I've been sending our survey type of materials to our marketing team for the college. And like I said, we are trying to move to the whole online orientation. Currently, our students do have to complete a TC application online. So that's the one step online that they can do right now. And we hope during the spring or before spring classes start that we'll have our enrollment forms online as well as surveys embedded online so that they have one place to go.
I think that is all the specific questions.
So I just wanted to say a big thank you to our presenters today. It's such timely information. It's great information. And, you know, I kind of purposely chose the presenters that I did based off of, you know, the resources that they have available. And I think that's one message I definitely want to send out there and put out there is kind of understanding that this is something that, you know, we're all kind of responsible for doing, but it's very apparent to me that we do not all have the same resources available. So we've got to be able to kind of create this community of practice and sharing so that we, you know, can all build something that's going to really work for us with the resources that we have. The second message really here is this is something that we want to continue. So, you know, necessity breeds invention, right? That's what the pandemic did for us. But at the state level, we're looking at this and we're loving that our students have these options and that we're able to kind of meet people where they are and based off of their preferences. So I don't want everybody to think this is, you know, a lot of hard work that then when the pandemic ends, and it will end, folks. At some point, we will get there together. But when it does, we want to really try to maintain this sense of online and remote learning and distance learning and make this a successful thing that we just do here in Texas. Many of the other states, for those of you that don't know, many of the other states don't even have distance learning as an option, much less the remote learning that we've been able to create and you guys have been able to create here through both our state policy and our local implementation practices. So kudos to you guys, all the glory for y'all because you're the ones having to do the hard work. So thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate you being here and we'll see you next time.
All right. Thank you, Mahalia.